Today marks the beginning of Ramadan, the 9th month in the Islamic lunar calendar. Begins today. It goes until the last Sunday of July. And one of the most striking features of Ramadan is that observant Muslims will fast from well before sunrise through sunset every day. Every day for the next month. No food, no drink of any kind from the crack of dawn, the slightest sliver of light before sunrise through sunset. Dark. Fasting during Ramadan is one of what are known as the 5 pillars of Islam. There's the creed. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. There's prayer at regular times, 5 times a day. There's giving of one's riches to the poor at a prescribed amount of at least 2.5%. That's the standard. Fasting during Ramadan. And the 5th pillar is a personal pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca at least one time in your life, if at all possible. The Hajj, it's called. It seems most Muslims take quite seriously the fasting during the month of Ramadan. It's estimated that well more than 90% of the world's 1.6 billion Muslims observe the fast. And it's not uncommon that there's an elevated spirit of generosity also during the month. Some Muslims joke that Ramadan's a good time to ask a Muslim for a donation because he's probably going to be quicker to say yes, and he's probably going to give more than he would have another time of the year. And if he gets upset with you because you're asking, you can remind him that he's also supposed to keep his anger in check during the month of Ramadan, and he'll probably write you the check soon. And since the fast goes from before sunset, from before sunrise through sunset each day, it is not surprising at all for rich Saudi princes to take a vacation during Ramadan to somewhere in the far southern hemisphere, probably Patagonia, where the daylight hours are very short. It's a true story. You'll hear about Ramadan in the next 4 weeks. It may have a bearing on the World Cup, on NFL training camps, on world affairs, maybe even on armed conflicts. A good Muslim is expected to pay attention to the 5 pillars of Islam. And fasting during Ramadan is one of those 5 pillars. Now, to something Jesus said about fasting and about praying and about giving. Matthew 6. And the heart of the Sermon on the Mount. It's page 1030 in the Worship Bible. If you see this black hardback book somewhere within arm's reach, you may want to turn to it, open it, and follow along as I read many verses from Matthew 6, and then we home in on just a few verses, but in some detail. I'm going to focus on verses 16 through 18, but to get the context as well as some important points from Jesus, I'll start at verse 1 of Matthew 6. Jesus is teaching, and he says in this Sermon on the Mount, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." Before we go on, let me just point out what is plain there. Jesus is addressing the heart. He's addressing the attitude as he teaches about acts of righteousness and doing good deeds and engaging in worthy spiritual exercises, spiritual disciplines. He's not saying that no one should ever see you giving or praying or fasting, but he is saying that you don't do it in order to be seen by others as you do it. That is a main point, and it's one to take to heart and to keep in mind. Beware of pride. Don't make yourself the focal point. Don't draw attention to yourself. If you do these good things, but do them in the wrong way in order to be noticed by others, probably in order to impress others or to make yourself look good to others, then that is your reward. And you should not expect anything more. Certainly nothing from God. But if you do these things in the right way, and Jesus expects that his followers will do these things, and that's clear from what he says, then you can expect God will do much more for you than you could ever do for yourself. And that's something always to keep in mind. God is able to do far more than we can do for ourselves, and immeasurably more than we ask or can even imagine. So, let's see some of what Jesus says about giving and praying and fasting. Verse 2, and we read through verse 18. Thus, or so, don't forget what he's just said. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Plainly, I cannot know what you will notice as you read these words, read them again, think about them. But let me point out a few things we must not miss. First, Jesus assumes that people who believe in him and trust him and follow him will give money for the sake of others, and they will pray, and they will fast. You see that? Jesus does not say, if you give, or if you pray, or if you fast. He says, when you give, verse 2, along with verse 3, and when you pray, verse 5, along with verse 6 and 7, and when you fast, verse 17, along with verse 16, along with verse 17. I mean, it's clear. When you fast, when you pray, when you give. And Jesus is not saying that these good works are required for salvation. Not saying that. But he is saying that those who have faith in him and are saved will do these good works. He takes that for granted. It's supposed to be part of who we are as followers of Jesus. We will give. We will pray. We will fast. Then, notice there are ways not to give and to pray and to fast. Don't be like hypocrites. People who want others to think they are someone other than who they really are. That's what a hypocrite is. They aren't really who they present themselves to be. Don't be like the hypocrites. Verse 2, verse 5, verse 16. It's plain. Don't miss that. And then you'll notice Jesus gave examples of the hypocrites' methods. Verse 2, they make sure people see them giving. They make sure people notice their contributions. They hold press conferences. They name buildings after themselves. They make sure people see them putting their offering envelopes in the offering plate. They're splashy about their contributions. And I'm gonna say something here. It's kind of off the cuff. I'm not looking at Darla because right now she's looking panic-stricken whenever I go off script. But, you know, it's really none of your business what someone else is doing with the offering plate. You know, if you notice, I don't ever see them putting anything in the offering plate. Maybe they give electronically. And there's a growing number of you who do that. Maybe they mail their contributions to church. Maybe they have an arrangement with their financial institution that sends a check once a month or a couple times a year. That happens. Maybe they give twice a year. They write really big checks a couple times a year. You know, so mind your own business. And mind your own business. So, you know, it'd be great if more and more people gave electronically. That'd be fabulous. I've been in churches where they have like a secure box on the wall in the lobby or in the back of the sanctuary, and they don't even have an offering time during the service, and I find that very intriguing. It's not my call, but I wonder, you know, but that doesn't prevent a person from being splashy, you know. No, right. But that's what Jesus says the hypocrites are doing. They want to make sure people see, they notice, they pay attention. Don't be like that. Wasn't so bad, was it, Darla? I'll return to what I had prepared. So, verse 5. They pray in prominent places, and they make sure people notice them, and that others hear them. Notice how Jesus put it. That they may be seen by others. Verse 16. When the hypocrites fast, they want everyone else to know just how hungry and uncomfortable and afflicted they are. Because they want others to know that they're fasting and they're doing the good thing. But they're doing it badly and making it not a good thing at all. Jesus knows that people will see us giving and praying and fasting, and they may know about it. But it should not be our aim to make sure that people notice us and know about it. There's a difference. So, Jesus says then to keep your focus on the Father in heaven. That's a third thing to be sure to notice from his teachings here. One, he assumes his followers will give and pray and fast. Two, there are ways not to give and pray and fast. And three, keep your focus on the Father in heaven. And that is the way to give and pray and fast. Now, notice what Jesus says about the Father. Repeatedly. He sees in secret. And will reward you. That's there in verse 4. It's there in verse 6. It's there in verse 18. Jesus makes it plain and he repeats it. We must not miss it. And we do well to take it to heart. The Father sees what is done in secret. Think about that. And if you were plowing through Psalm 139 in the fighter verses, that's a point that came through repeatedly as well. The Father sees and knows everything, everywhere. The Father sees in secret, where no one else notices. And the Father rewards those who combine their works with their faith and give and pray and fast even when no one else notices. Especially when no one else notices. To conclude this morning, let's consider for just a few moments what is probably the more neglected of the three spiritual disciplines or religious exercises or expressions of faith that we see here in Matthew 6. Probably the most neglected. I don't know. How can I know? I shouldn't know. But fasting. I can't tell you how you should fast. But I can tell you that you should fast. Because Jesus assumes his followers will fast. That's right here in Matthew 6. He endorses it. He recommends it. And even says fasting is something we should plan for and look forward to. That's what is meant when Jesus says to anoint your head and wash your face. That's what people did when they were going out in public for a celebration or to participate in a festival. Anoint your head, wash your face, look good, look happy, be ready to celebrate. Then, be clear what Jesus says. When you fast, which means he takes it for granted that we will fast from time to time, even regularly. Just off script. Obviously, Jesus means that we're supposed to do this with some regularity, maybe even frequently. Praying is supposed to be a daily thing. Given the context, you pray like this. Give us this day our daily bread. You're saying, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. That's part and parcel of every prayer, every day, all the time. Giving is not just a occasional, once a year, a couple times a year thing for those listeners back then. It was all the time. You set it aside. You bring it every week. So we should draw the reasonable conclusion that Jesus endorses fasting on a regular basis, maybe even frequently. And we do well to remember the point at the end, which can be great motivation to fast. The Father will reward those who do this. Don't miss that. Don't be like the hypocrites. Oh, I'm so starving. Oh, man, this is miserable. Because they want to make sure that you know that they're fasting. Jesus says, no, just look good. Smile, be cheery, and remember the Father knows what you're doing, and he's going to reward those who engage in this spiritual discipline. I suggest that you pray and honestly, sincerely consider fasting in your life. It might mean you go without lunch once, twice a week. Now, I can't tell you how you should fast, but I can tell you you should fast. I should fast. Make it your aim to make it from breakfast until supper without eating lunch and without snacking all morning and afternoon too. Use the rumbles from your stomach to call you to prayer. and to remind you that man does not live by bread alone, and that you need the bread of life, Jesus Christ, way more than you need that sandwich. Maybe you'll think about going for a 24-hour period sometime and letting breakfast be the meal that does indeed break your fast. You may do very well to combine the spiritual exercise of fasting with other spiritual exercises like praying or memorizing Bible verses or thinking about and meditating on Scripture or writing in a spiritual journal. When you willingly go without food for a time, you may be more easily reminded of how many things you take for granted and you assume will always be there. Perhaps you'll be prompted to be more grateful. Perhaps you'll be prompted to pray for people around the world who are perpetually hungry and thirsty. And there are other ways to fast that may be just as effective at helping you focus on what you have because you willingly go without something for a time, a day, a week. It could be the internet. It could be television. It could be your iPhone. I'd rather skip lunch. I got, oh man, I've gotten some texts. Who just texted me, wrap this baby up? Okay, I'm kidding. You know I'm telling the truth. Some of you would rather go without lunch than to put this thing down from morning until evening. Maybe you've grown so used to reaching for your smartphone to check texts and Facebook. Who's liked my post recently? You're almost addicted to Twitter and email, that going without it for a day could be just exactly what you need. And you don't know it. Using the absence of your iPhone to prompt you to focus on your Father in heaven, and using the time you would have spent on Facebook in the good book instead might be precisely what you need and exactly what honors God. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. That's what Jesus promised. I don't know exactly what those rewards will be for you, what they'll be for me. I don't know. But Jesus says there will be rewards. Do we take him at his word? Do we believe him? I don't know exactly why a good Muslim fasts during Ramadan, but a good Muslim fasts. It has something to do with obedience, submission, discipline, and duty. I do know why a good Christian fasts. It has something to do with obedience, submission, discipline, and delight. Because it is always good for us to do what Jesus says. And it is always wise to remember that the Father in heaven, who sees in secret, will reward us as we pursue him and honor him. Truly, it will be for his glory. And of course, it will be for our good too. Amen. Let's stand.